Are you concerned about the threat of nuclear war? If you've been watching the news, you know that the world is going a little bit weird, and we're probably closer to that potential than we've ever been, except maybe at the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was way back in the 60s. So many people are getting interested in sheltering. If you're interested in some kind of a DIY shelter, this is something you want to see. Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Kylene. We are sensing an increased urgency to prepare our family to be protected from radioactive fallout in the event of a nuclear event. Now, we did a video just last week where we interviewed Jay Whimpey, and we talked about expedient shelters, shelters that you can build in a very short period of time, a matter of hours, when you hear that something is coming.
Now, this video will be a continuation of that. Jay's going to talk to us a little bit more about something beyond expedient sheltering. This is a DIY projects you can build yourself for providing shelter for your family. Now, these can be a little more time intensive, more expensive, but they can also provide a place for you to store supplies and other things that you might need in such a crisis.
And for those of you that think that you cannot survive such an event, honestly, if we just prepare well and we know what to do, the odds are greatly with us. Now, we're going to leave a link in the description of this video to a few resources, some books that we think should be in every prepper library because they're just such a great resource. So let's chat with Jay and see what kind of creative things we can come up with to build our own shelter.
Hey, Provident Preppers, we are back again with Jay Whimpey. For those of you that missed it, you will want to go back and check out the first Zoom meeting that we did with Jay. He talked all about the importance of preparing for nuclear survival, whatever that looks like, whether that's a nuclear accident, nuclear war, whatever it is. He has a lot of great information and provided a lot of really significant information about how to prepare, how to take some basic steps to prepare. And we're going to follow that up today with another presentation right after Mama introduces Jay again and tells you a little bit about him and his qualifications.
Yeah, that first video was all about expedient sheltering. So if you don't have a fallout shelter in your backyard, it's how to pull something together really quick so that you and your family can be safe, and what to do if you get caught out on the road someplace and you need to hunker down. So Jay is awesome. We have been friends for so many years. I just love and appreciate Jay. In fact, it's his fault that I used to be the editor of the Journal of Civil Defense. And TACDA, the American Civil Defense Association, puts out some really fantastic information. So I would highly encourage you to go check them out. And you can become a member of the American Civil Defense Association for free. And all you have to do is go and sign up, and then you can have access to all the past journals digitally for free. If you want a membership where you receive the actual magazines in the mail, you do have to pay for that. And I think it's worth the money, but make sure that you check them out, because Jay is actually the president of the American Civil Defense Association right now. He has a bachelor's of science degree in chemical engineering from the University of Utah and professional engineering license in 1995. But I mean, we have been working with Jay for so many years, and I am totally in awe of his great wisdom and knowledge and his background.
Dedication.
And dedication. A lot of good service, but his background in chemical engineering comes in really handy with all of this.
Absolutely does.
So welcome, Jay.
And again, today we're talking, thank you for being here. Today we're talking more about sheltering, and we're going to let you provide us with a wealth of information about how people could construct a shelter. And
we're talking about do-it-yourself, more inexpensive type sheltering,
right?
Because there are some we have some other friends who actually construct real legitimate fallout and blast shelters, and they are fantastic. We've toured some of them and
Certainly.
talked about some really cool stuff. But today we're going to focus on more of the do-it-yourself,
Right.
things that are within the budget of more of us. Right, Jay?
So Jay, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that can be done. I guess I would just add very quickly that can actually buy a memory stick that is somewhat EMP proof and waterproof, and it has all of the past issues of the Journal of Civil Defense on a little memory stick, and there's plenty of extra room
cool.
to put other stuff as well. So, and again, well, you can also buy a printed copy of the Journal of Civil Defense. They print these in enough numbers to where they can get some better deals on the printing, and so I think they're about $25. But basically, this book is essential, I would say, for surviving a nuclear war, and that's the way it was. That's what it was intended to do, and the people that wrote it actually knew what they were talking about. They were real scientists, and they had access to the open air nuclear testing that they did in Southern Nevada. So they were able to test out some concepts, and so now we can take advantage of that, and it's become much more critical, I would say, for us, because we are seem to be inching closer to a nuclear conflict, and it could get out of hand very quickly. So anyway,
Jay actually provided a link to that, and we'll put it in the description of the video so that you have a free electronic copy of it, because it's really hard to find them now. He was telling us that he went to like an expo or a gun show, and the guy wanted $600 for it. So if you want a hard copy, TACDA.org, that's a great place to go to get it. But you can get it free, the information free online. So Jay, tell us a little bit, just super quick, why should we worry about a nuclear event now? Why is it important?
Well, the conflict in Ukraine has Russia pretty worked up, and they haven't been very successful in the conventional warfare arena, and so they may be pushed into a nuclear war. In fact, as late as last night, well, no, it was just a day or two ago, that Vladimir Putin was actually threatening to use nuclear weapons, and then there were even some leadership on our side that were kind of escalating. They weren't using de-escalation type terms. They were using escalating type terms, and so there are many people think that we're closer to a nuclear war than we've ever been, and I think there's a legitimate reason to believe that. We're definitely close, and it seems like once the nuclear conflict starts, the weapons are there, the delivery systems are there, and so they could actually be used at any time, especially with somebody who feels a little bit of desperation and frustration. So I think we're getting close. We may be getting close.
So explain to us the science behind why we need to protect ourselves from nuclear radioactive fallout. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, beyond the blast and heat effects of a nuclear weapon, the longer lasting effect is the radioactive fallout, and that's the material. Well, when a nuclear weapon goes off, it sucks up a whole bunch of the local material into the big nuclear fireball. Much of that becomes radioactive, and that is it's drawn very high in the atmosphere, and then it can be deposited downrange. And so where a relatively small percentage of the population, maybe 10 to 15%, would be involved in the direct heat and blast effects of a nuclear weapon, perhaps the majority, maybe 70, 80% of the people would actually be faced with a situation where they would have to deal with radioactive fallout and provide some distance and shielding for themselves to protect themselves from that, from the radioactivity. The First of all, that there is also an element of time, and the radiation from a nuclear weapon and the fallout decays on an exponential curve, and that means that it drops very quickly, very early in this stage. And they have a 7-10 rule that actually 7 hours after after the nuclear fallout is deposited, in that first 7 hours, or after 7 hours, the radiation would be 1/10 of the initial amount. And then if we 7 times 7 hours, like go to 48 hours or 2 days, then it drops to another 10, drops another 90% to 1/10 of what it was. And so after 2 days, the radiation would be only 1/100th of what it was initially. And then if you 7 times that again and go to roughly 2 weeks, then it would only be 1/1000th of what it was initially. And so it decays very quickly at the start, and then it starts to stretch out a little bit. But still, we could face environments where you're actually getting 3,000 rads per hour, where 600 rads could kill you. And so basically you could receive a lethal dose in a radioactive environment caused by the fallout in less than 15 minutes. You wouldn't die immediately, but you would receive the lethal dose. Many of your cells would become non-viable, and you would start to hemorrhage inside, and you would die within a few weeks. But that emphasizes that the distance and the shielding are the measures that we take to protect ourselves from the radiation would only have to be engaged or employed for maybe a month or two, and then we could actually live relatively normal lives, and perhaps we would only sleep in a shielded area. But we could get out and do most of our daily activities as we normally would, perhaps being a little bit careful to not ingest or get exposed directly to the dust. But so we're left with the challenge of providing some distance and shielding, and the shielding aspect is basically we just need to put mass between us and the radiation. We usually talk of shielding in halving thicknesses of certain materials, and with gamma radiation, if you have 1 inch of lead, that would have the amount of radiation that was on the other side of that 1 inch of lead. So not a lot of people keep that much lead around, and it's probably only used in some nuclear facilities. However, we need to we can deal with more commonly available materials like concrete. Concrete provides has a halving thickness of 4 inches, and so if you have 4 inches of concrete, that'll cut the amount of gamma radiation in half. And then if you happen to add 4 more inches of concrete, that cuts it by another half. So that would be 1/4 of the radiation actually would make it through to affect you. And we can continue to do that, and most people after that would be perhaps using compacted earth, and earth would provide, it has a halving thickness of 5 inches. And so if you added, let's say, 5 inches and 5 inches on top of that for 1/4, 5 inches on top of that for 1/8, and 5 inches on top of that for 1/16 and 1/32 and whatever. So if you add a few feet of dirt, that's a very legitimate shielding, and that can go a long way to protect you from the effects of the radiation in the outside environment. Other materials will work. Food storage is good. A drum of water or containers of water, that's a relatively dense material, and or even books, or anything that's relatively heavy, has a lot of mass. It can protect you. I think the halving thickness of wood is roughly 36 inches. So, wood is probably, depending on the type of wood or whatever, but it's not as useful as a shielding material. And so we just have to provide a structure that has a lot of mass on top of it, or mass between us and where radioactive fallout would be deposited from a nuclear weapon. At that, and if you can imagine, an expedient shelter, or well, something that could be prepared, I guess, in advance that wouldn't be too much of a bother. That would be perhaps in a basement if you purchase some drums of food storage or water, and you fill those full of weed or wheat or water, and you arrange them in your basement with a 90-degree turn for the entrance. Then you could be shielded all the way around on the sides, and then on top of those drums you could lay down some 2x12 planks, and and then pile a lot more food storage and or even bags of dirt or anything like that on top of that structure. Then you would have an area that is highly protected from radiation, depending on how much you can imagine that. And if you say had the drums are only 3 feet high, but and so that would leave you roughly 4 to 5 feet of material that you could pile on top of that. And you would be in a structure that's only 3 feet high, so you'd have to spend most of your time sitting or lying down. But it would protect you from the radiation, and it would only last for a few weeks, basically, that you would have to do that. So it would be worthwhile to protect the ones that you love and yourself, so that you can take care of them.
Now you've got some great ideas for some do-it-yourself bigger ones, right? Some nice shelters.
Yeah. There's nicer shelters. I guess we could start out, if you're actually going to build a structure. In nuclear war survival skills, they did an exercise where they took a couple of college-age girls and had them prepare themselves a shelter on the outside, and basically that consisted of digging a trench roughly 4 feet wide and 4 feet deep outside, and it doesn't have to be all that long, maybe 10 or 15 feet, depending on how many people you're going to put in there, and then laying some planks or timbers across the trench, and then putting the dirt from the trench back on top of that, on the timbers or planks, and that provides an area that would be protected from fallout largely. You'd have to cover the entrances so that you didn't get dust coming down into your trench to protect you, but it would work. It should be noted that the particles that become radioactive are usually involved in the atomic fireball, and they get the particles become relatively large. So it's not like a real fine clay type dust. It's more of a heavy sand, or tends to be kind of rounded particles, but they tend to be relatively heavy and come out drop straight down, and then are not usually moved around too much, except by perhaps heavy winds. So a ground burst produces a lot more of those particles than an air burst. A lot of the destructive capacity of the weapon, of a nuclear weapon, can actually be increased if it's detonated a few thousand feet above the Earth. That way, the destructive power is spread over a wider area rather than a ground burst. But things like airport runways and missile silos require a ground burst to destroy them, and so we would expect some ground bursts and perhaps even more air bursts in a classical nuclear attack. Beyond that, if you wanted to go perhaps one step further, you can actually produce it's well within the capability of most people to build a post and beam type structure. And I build a structure. It's probably not going to be published until until the next journal comes out. But basically, it was a wooden structure with 8 by 8 inch posts, roughly 10 feet high, and then on top of those were 8 by 12 inch beams, and then on top of that it was 4 by 12 inch planks on top of it and then that can support roughly 3 to 4 feet of dirt. And then it was just 2 by 12 planks that were put around the side of that structure. The interior of the structure is roughly 8 feet wide and 20 feet long, and then it's covered with plastic in order to keep the moisture out, as well as protecting the wood from the moisture in the soil. And so basically you just build a structure, and the foundation of the structure isn't concrete either. You actually use one of the 4 by 12 planks and completely wrap it in plastic. And I actually put a lag screw up through the planks on 4-foot centers, and then I drilled holes in the bottom of the posts, and that way I could set the posts on those lag screws, and I pre-drilled the hole in there in the posts to get them set in the right position. And we just make sure they're vertical, and then I actually put a garbage sack around the bottom of the posts again to protect them from any moisture. And but it's a wooden structure with a wooden foundation, relatively heavy structure, and you can pile enough dirt around that to make it a good fallout shelter. I had a structural engineer look at it for me just to make sure I wasn't going to be overdoing it or whatever, and then the price of building materials was so high that I didn't use the normal finished lumber that you use for building a house, but I went to a local sawmill and asked them to make my posts and beams and planks, and it was surprisingly inexpensive, I guess. It ends up costing roughly $6,000 for all the lumber to build, and the structure is it's a dual use unit. Basically, it serves as a root cellar, and then you'd actually be able to use it as as a fallout shelter. And it's already fully stocked with food and water, and even some sleeping bags and pads, and the sanitation materials are out there. So basically, it's all ready to go. And the door ended up, and I have a 1/4-inch plate steel door that's reinforced with just 1-inch angle, but it's on some very sturdy hinges with a 3 by 3 inch angle frame that's bolted with like 6-inch lag bolts into those posts. And so it's very sturdy, has a very sturdy security door. I have another environmental door behind the security door because steel doesn't really insulate all that well. And then you have the interior of the structure. So
is it on concrete? Is the floor concrete, or is it dirt?
The floor is it's actually a wooden floor. Basically, you cover the outside with plastic. You actually cover the floor with plastic. It's dirt with plastic, and then I did use some plywood and some lumber. I supported the floor on the posts. I think in the future I'll have kind of to improve the design, I would have just a floating floor where you lay plank down on the floor. You rake out sand nice and smooth, put some plastic down, lay your plank out, and then lay plywood on top of that.
Okay.
And so you're just floor a wooden floor that's fairly easy and it'll support a lot of weight. But for the that was cost of $6,000 or $7,000. You can make yourself a nice cellar that could function as a fallout shelter as well.
So on the outside, when somebody is walking up to this, does it just look like a hill of dirt?
It looks like a hill of dirt, except for where the entrance is, and then you have the large post and beam where the door is set. And I haven't done this yet, but I plan on tacking up a little bit of chicken wire to that, and then painting it with basically slathering the mortar, the concrete type material on that in order to protect it from taking fire, in the event of a nuclear attack or
Yeah.
or a local fire or something like that. So basically, they'll just see a a, a steel door, 7 foot high, 3 foot wide steel door, and then a big mound of dirt.
Interesting. That sounds so cool.
I can, well, one step up from that, if you want, I guess. I did put in a steel shelter quite a few years ago. I actually finished the door in 1996. So anyway, so I've had it for quite some time. But that that shelter was a 10,000 gallon fuel storage tank that had never been put in service. But I'm always looking for opportunities, I guess, and I happened to notice an opportunity when there was a trucking business that had gone out of business, and there was a real estate sign there in front of the buildings, but they had 2 fuel storage tanks sitting on the ground outside in the yard. And I called the real estate person. I said, "How would you like to get rid of those fuel storage tanks?" And he says, "I would love to get rid of the fuel storage tanks." And I said, "Well, I want to be fair with you. I'll give you scrap metal prices for them." And he says, "Done." So anyway, and then I called a guy that had excavation and excavation equipment and heavy trucks and trailers and all that kind of stuff. And I said, "I have a couple of fuel storage tanks I'd like to move, and if you as payment, you can have one of the tanks, and I'll take the other tank." And I had him put the tank in my backyard, and I spent better part of a year, I think, welding a structure on the inside and putting in a door and things of that nature on the outside, putting in some ventilation stubs and things of that nature. And then I had him come in and dig a hole and bury it for me. I happen to have, again, just opportunities, there were some people doing some excavating, and they were putting in a sewer system in the neighborhood. And so I had them deliver a bunch of extra dirt there. I have a relatively high water table. It can be as high as, 3 or 4 feet below the surface. And so I only put the shelter, or the body. It's laying horizontally. It's about 8 feet in diameter and 21 feet long. And it's 3 feet below grade. And then it's 5 feet above grade, and then there's roughly 10 feet of dirt on top of that shelter. And I put one of the Swiss-made ventilation systems in there, which happened to be the most expensive part of that shelter. And then I took a welding class so that I could use their wire feed welders and gas. And I built my shelter door in a welding class, and a very inexpensive way to do it, basically. And then I poured concrete around the entrance, and so I did put it in some corrugated pipe that had a 90-degree in it as the entrance that goes into the door of the shelter itself. So anyway, so that project was probably $10,000. Quite a bit of sweat equity involved in that, but $10,000 out of pocket, installed 25 years ago. And with some good opportunities, but you can build a shelter like that. And
it give you a lot of peace knowing you've got this in your backyard, and that living so close to an Air Force base, right, a military base, you've got a safe place to go.
Yes, and there's a lot of peace involved in that. When the shelter is stuffed full of food and equipment, and it's a good place to keep equipment that might be EMP sensitive, and also food storage that needs to be kept cool to lengthen its storage life.
I was just going to ask you if it works as a Faraday cage.
Yeah, it does. It does. It has I have a line, some electrical run in there, to keep the batteries charged up and all that kind of stuff. But I just have a small box with the outlets on it, hooked to the end of a wire, and I can always just take that out and put it outside the shelter, close the other door, or close the inner door basically, and so I would be electrically and totally isolated from everything outside. So it would and there's hand generators in there to make power for lights, and the ventilation system. I guess you'd have to operate manually on a fairly regular basis, and it's fully stocked where I could have my entire family, including children, spouses, and grandchildren, I guess, and we can hang out there for a few months if we needed to. It'd be tough, but it's a possibility at that point.
Yeah, that is so awesome. That is so awesome. Okay, so resources. You have something says $50 and up underground house book. Tell me what that is.
Well, there is a book called the $50 and Up Underground House Book, and that is by Mike Euler, or Ohler, something like that. Anyway, that gives you a few ideas on how. Well, that's kind of where I got the idea of the post and beam type structure, covered with plastic and then just buried once you build the structure. So that tells you a little bit about trying to build a house underground. He usually has some kind of modified structures that have windows and doors. I went for a tunnel approach, and so it made it a lot more a tunnel with a 90-degree turn in it, basically, in order to help with the radiation protection. And that's another thing I guess you could talk about on the design of a shelter. The distance of a tunnel reduces the amount of radiation that can come down that tunnel, and then every time you turn a 90 degree, then that reduces the radiation level by 90%. And so coming in and making one 90-degree turn actually helps attenuate the radiation or potential radiation in that structure by 90% of what you would receive outside. So making the entrance smaller, like my underground steel shelter, it has a 3-foot, maybe even I think it's a 30-inch diameter tube as an entrance, and then 4-inch ventilation piping. The other, and that just helps attenuate the radiation. The cellar, it's a stand-up, walk-in entrance, but it does have 190-degree turn. But in the event you're actually using it as a fallout shelter, the natural thing to do would be to go inside the shelter, close the door, and then stack a lot of the food storage that's already in there against the door, and that would also help attenuate any radiation inside the shelter.
I have to tell you, if you have lots of money and you want somebody to do all of this for you, Utah Shelter Systems.
Yeah.
There's some great people there, and they could do it all for you. You just have to have a bigger budget than we do. All right.
It's been quite a few years ago, but you're probably in the range of $100,000 to build a 50-foot length, 10-foot diameter shelter that has the entryways and the ventilation system and all that. So anyway, it's a definite, it's another order of magnitude greater, I guess, in cost rather than some of these home built ones.
Yep. And this is a little bit expedient, right? We need something. We've got to be thinking about this now because the danger is clear and present. Right?
Right.
Yes,
it is.
What do you have for us, John?
No, I just think this is something really important. There's a quotation. I'm just going to read a little part of this. This is from Edward Teller. He was the father of the hydrogen bomb. And I'll just read this first little portion. It says, in the most dangerous situation, we have chosen the most dangerous of courses. We have chosen not to face our danger. And I just think it's, sometimes we don't like to think about these things. We don't like to dwell on it, if you will, but we need to be realistic. We understand that there is a threat there. We understand that there are things that we can do to alleviate that threat. And it's just up to us to take a few steps. This doesn't have to cost a lot of money. You can do something very rudimentary that will still give you the protection you need. It's not going to probably be as comfortable, but there are things that we can do. And I think this is a significant threat that we need to at least think about and put into our planning process. So this has been great. We appreciate your expertise, Jay. We appreciate the time that you've taken to visit with us. And we would actually like to do a third video where we talk about, how we come out of the back end of this, some different things that would be significant and important. But for now, we will sign off, and we will look forward to that third video somewhere in the near future.
Well, first, Jay, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Final words.
I appreciate being able to promote preparedness. I guess that's one of my passions. I guess a lot of P words there, but this is my passion, and I would just encourage everybody to do something today. If nothing more than just pick out a place in your house and say, this would be where we would do our shielding in a expedient manner, and then start gathering supplies. You can do something today. And if you put it off till tomorrow and the day after that, whatever, nothing gets done. So it's important just to do today. And I guess one more detail with an underground shelter that tends to be relatively tight, you do need to design in a ventilation system. But again, Crescent Kearney and nuclear war survival skills actually comes to the rescue, and they actually have a Kearney air pump that is just a positive displacement pump that you can manufacture yourself, that would tend to make sure you have enough air to survive in that shelter. And actually, I did a little improvement on the Kearney air pump and added a chemical biological filtration unit, aspect to that air pump, and so you could actually be protected from chemical, biological, and nuclear agents inside of your expedient underground shelter if you built one.
Awesome. And if I understand correctly, there will be an article coming out on your pump, step-by-step details, in one of the Journal of Defense magazines soon, right?
Right. This very next issue, which I just barely got the copy, so it's gone to the printer, but it's not quite out yet, but it should be distributed within the next couple of weeks.
The TACDA, the American Civil Defense Association, is a great resource. And since you can become a member for free and get all that information, I would highly encourage you to do that. So now for the question of the day, though, what are you going to do today to make your family more prepared to survive a nuclear event? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.